Welcome. Wherever you are right now, however dark the room, however tired your mind, let this be the moment you finally stop holding everything so tightly. If you came here tonight carrying something heavy, a mistake you can't take back, a version of yourself you wish you could quietly set down and walk away from, you are exactly where you need to be. You don't have to explain any of it, not to me, not to anyone, not tonight. You can simply let your shoulders drop an inch, let your jaw unclench, let your eyes close if they haven't already, and let this be the 1 hour where absolutely nothing is asked of you. Whether sleep finds you in the next few minutes, or you're only here looking for somewhere quiet to rest your mind for a while, this hour belongs to you either way. There's no wrong way to listen to this. Tonight, we're going to tell one of the oldest stories there is about coming home. It's a story about a young man who walked as far from love as his own 2 feet could carry him, and a father who never once, not for a single evening, stopped watching the road for his return. If some part of you has ever wondered whether you've wandered too far to be welcomed back, whether too much time has passed, or too much has happened, or you've simply made too many wrong turns to find your way to anyone's open arms again, stay close tonight. This one is for you. Let your body sink a little heavier into wherever you're resting. There's nowhere else you need to be right now, and nothing left to figure out before morning. Picture for a moment an evening a very long time ago, in a warm and dry land where the hills turned the color of honey just before dusk. Picture a low stone house at the edge of a small town, thick walls still holding the day's heat, a wooden gate worn smooth by years of hands passing through it, olive trees standing quiet and silver in the last of the light. Notice for just a moment wherever your own body is holding on tighter than it needs to. The set of your jaw, the line of your shoulders. There's nothing to hold on to tonight. Let it go, a little at a time, the way the light in that valley was letting go of the day. Inside, a household is settling in for the evening. Bread rests near the fire. Oil lamps are being lit one by one in small clay bowls that will glow softly until morning. Somewhere, a dog stretches out across a cool doorstep. It is, in every ordinary way, just a home. The kind with familiar footsteps on the floor, and low voices carrying from room to room, and the smell of the evening meal beginning to fill the air. This is the house this story begins in. Not a grand house, not a famous one, just a good one. And every single evening, for reasons he couldn't quite explain even to himself, the man who owned that house, a father, getting older now, his beard more silver than it used to be, found some excuse to step out to the gate before the light was fully gone. To check on the fields, he'd tell you, to get some air before the meal. But his eyes always drifted, just once, toward the road. Keep that image close. We'll return to it before the night is over. For now, only listen. Let your mind stop reaching for anything else. Let the story carry you the way water carries something that has finally stopped fighting the current. In a small town, in a modest but good household, lived a father with 2 sons. He was not a wealthy man by the standards of kings or cities, but by every standard that mattered in that small town, he was a rich man indeed. Rich in land that had belonged to his family for generations. Rich in servants who had grown old in his household and were treated more like family than like help. And rich, more than anything else, in the quiet, steady love he carried for his 2 boys. The older son worked the land beside his father every single day. He rose early. He didn't complain. He was the kind of son a father could build an entire life around, dependable as the sunrise, present in every season, never once giving anyone a reason to worry about him. Their father was not a man given to raised voices, or quick judgments, or sudden movements of any kind. He was patient the way old trees are patient, slow to react, slow to bend, but somehow underneath all that stillness, deeply and completely alive. The kind of man who noticed everything and rushed nothing. The younger son was different. Not troubled exactly, not unloved, just restless in a way that seemed to live somewhere underneath his skin. Some evenings he would wander to the edge of the fields after the work was done and simply stand there, looking toward the hills, toward the road that curved away and disappeared from view. Something in his chest would ache, quietly, for a life he couldn't yet put a name to. A bigger life, a louder one. Something more than this same house, these same walls, these same faces every single day. It hadn't always felt that way. There had been a time, when he was younger, when his father would take him out past the last of the fields on quiet evenings and show him the stars just beginning to appear, naming the ones he knew, inventing names for the ones he didn't. Back then, this house, this land, this father, had felt like the whole entire world, and a good one. Something had shifted since then. Not all at once, nothing that dramatic. Just slowly, the way a rope frays, one small strand at a time, until one day you look down and realize how little is actually still holding. And every evening, without quite knowing why he did it, the father would glance once toward that very same road before turning back inside for the night. As if some part of him already knew where this was heading, long before it happened. As if a father's love comes with its own kind of sight. One evening, an evening that started out like any other, with the smell of bread and the sound of the animals being settled for the night, the younger son came to his father with a request that stopped the whole household mid-motion. "Father," he said, and his voice was steadier than his own heart felt. "Give me my share of the inheritance now, the part that would come to me one day. I don't want to wait for it anymore." The room went very quiet. You have to understand what a request like that actually meant in that time, in that place. To ask for your inheritance while your father was still alive and well was to say, in more words than he actually used, "I wish you were already gone. I want what's coming to me, and I don't want to wait for you to die to get it." The older son stiffened where he stood. A servant near the doorway quietly found somewhere else to look. Everyone in that room understood the weight of what had just been said out loud. But the father, after a long, long silence, the kind of silence that seemed to stretch the whole room thin, did something absolutely no one in that house expected. He said yes. Not because he failed to understand what it cost him. He understood completely. Every measure of grain, every strip of land, every year of labor that request represented. He understood all of it, in the very moment his son asked. But somewhere along the way, that father had learned something most people spend a whole lifetime resisting. That he had never truly held his sons by force, only by love. And love, real love, sometimes has to open its hands completely and let go, even when every part of it is terrified of what will happen next. So he divided everything he had between his two sons, exactly as the younger one had asked. And within a matter of days, the younger son had gathered his portion, packed the few things a young man packs when he believes he's leaving hardship behind rather than walking straight into it, and set out down that very same road his father had quietly watched every evening of his life. He didn't look back. Not once. If he had simply turned around before the road curved out of sight, he might have seen his father still standing at the gate long after the dust of his leaving had settled back down onto the path. One hand still raised. Not quite a farewell. More like a promise neither of them could have explained yet. The road, at first, felt like nothing but freedom. For the very first time in his life, no one was watching him, measuring him, waiting for him to become something. He could sleep whenever he wanted, spend whatever he wanted, become whoever it was he'd always suspected he might be, underneath the good, steady, expected version of himself he'd worn his whole life like a coat that never quite fit. He traveled for many days, further than he had ever imagined a journey could stretch, until he arrived in a distant country, a place loud with music spilling out of open doorways, bright with color, full of people who laughed easily and welcomed him without asking a single question about where he'd come from. As long as his coins kept the wine flowing and the tables full, he had more friends in that first season than he'd ever had in his whole life back home. There was a particular night, early on, that he would remember later more clearly than almost anything else from that whole season. A courtyard strung with lamps, laughter spilling over rooftops, someone he'd known for barely a week raising a cup in his honor as though they'd been friends for years. He remembers thinking, that night, that he had finally escaped whatever it was that had made him feel so restless back home. He didn't know yet that a friendship built entirely on an open purse has a very particular shelf life. For a while, and it's worth admitting this honestly, because the story is more true this way, it really did feel like he'd finally found what he'd been aching for all along. It rarely lasts, though, that particular kind of belonging, the kind that's bought instead of built slowly over years, out of people actually choosing you again and again. His money went the way money goes when nothing steady is anchoring it down. A little spent here on a feast for people he barely knew. A little more there on something to fill an evening that would otherwise feel too quiet. Until one day, without any single dramatic moment marking it, there simply wasn't any left. Not one coin. Before the very end, he sold what little he still had left to sell. A cloak his father had given him. A ring that had been his grandfather's, for whatever coins a stranger in a marketplace would offer. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself a great many things in those final weeks that turned out not to be true. And it was only then, in that sudden emptiness, that he noticed how quickly the laughter around him had begun to thin out. How few of those easy, warm friends were anywhere to be found once he had nothing left to offer them. Doors that had always opened for him stayed shut. Faces that had always lit up at his approach now looked past him, toward someone new, someone who still had coins jingling in his purse. As if the whole thing had only ever been borrowed light, and now that the lamp had gone dark, there was nothing left to see by. And then, as if the world wanted to make its point completely undeniable, a severe famine swept over that entire country. Prices climbed higher than anyone could keep up with. Food grew scarce even for the people who had planned wisely, who had saved, who had built something solid to stand on. He had built nothing. He had saved nothing. He was, in every sense that mattered, entirely alone now, and hungry, and about as far as a person can get from anyone who had ever loved him without expecting something back in return. The nights were the hardest. In the daylight there was at least work to distract him, small tasks to occupy his hands. But at night, lying wherever he could find shelter, there was only the hollow ache in his stomach, and the far-off sound of the town he was no longer welcome in, and more time than he wanted to think about exactly how he'd arrived here. I want to be gentle with the next part of this story, because shame already knows how to be cruel enough on its own, without any help from me. He found work, the only work a stranger with absolutely nothing to his name could find in that desperate season, feeding pigs for a local farmer. For a son who had been raised in a home where such animals were never even kept, where he had grown up believing certain things were simply beneath the dignity of his family, it was about as far from his father's table as an entire life could possibly fall. Some evenings, watching those animals eat their fill, while his own stomach ached with hunger, he found himself almost envying them. Almost. This is the part of the story where he stood furthest from home. And I don't mean the distance in miles. He could have walked back to his father's gate in a matter of days, if he'd chosen to. I mean the distance he carried inside his own chest. The particular, heavy conviction that he had fallen too far, disgraced himself too completely, spent too much of what had been given to him in love to ever be welcomed anywhere near that door again. And maybe you know a little of what that feels like. Not pigs, maybe, not famine, but that particular ache, the one that comes from realizing you've wandered somewhere you never meant to go, and wondering, quietly, in the dark, whether the way back even still exists for someone like you. Stay with the story a little longer. It isn't finished yet, not even close. Let's pause here for just a moment. If your own mind has wandered somewhere heavy while listening, some memory of your own far country, your own hungry season, that's all right. Let it surface and let it pass, the way clouds pass without needing anything from you. Feel the weight of your own body right now, wherever you're resting. You are not in that famine. You are not that hungry, that far from home. You are here, safe, warm, only listening. The story isn't finished. Let's keep going. It was there, sitting in the dirt among animals he was too hungry to properly envy, further from home than he had ever imagined a person could travel, that something in him finally shifted. Not despair exactly. Despair had already had its long, exhausting turn, back when the money first ran out, back when the friends stopped answering. This felt different, quieter, clearer somehow, the way the air feels different right after a storm finally breaks. He thought of his father's house. Not with fear exactly, though he fully expected he deserved some. He thought of it the way you think of something warm when you're standing very far away in the cold. The smell of bread rising near the fire, the oil lamps being lit one by one at dusk. The fact that even the hired servants in that house ate better, slept warmer, lived gentler lives than the one he was living now. "I will get up," he said, out loud, to no one but the dark and the animals and himself. "I will go back to my father. I won't ask to be his son again," he told himself, rehearsing it slowly, carefully, the way you rehearse something you're terrified of getting wrong. "I gave up that right the day I asked for my inheritance and turned my back on him. But I'll ask if there's room for me as one of his workers. Even that small mercy would be more than I have any right to expect." He rehearsed those words the entire way home. Rehearsed them until they wore smooth in his mouth, the way you turn something over and over in your hands until it stops feeling sharp, until it starts to feel less like hope and more like the sentence he was fully prepared to serve. The road back felt longer than the road out ever had. Maybe because every mile of it was shadowed by a question he couldn't quite silence, no matter how he tried. What if there's nothing left for me there? What if I used up whatever love he had the day I walked away? His clothes hung loose and worn on a frame that had grown thin. His feet were raw and blistered from days of walking on roads that didn't care how far he'd already come. The sun rose gold behind him each morning and set red ahead of him each evening, more times than he could easily count, and still he kept walking, because even a servant's narrow bed in his father's house sounded in that moment like more mercy than he had any right to hope for. One night, still days from home, he slept in the open beneath a sky thick with stars. The same wide, familiar sky that used to stretch over his father's fields. And for a moment, just before sleep finally took him, he let himself remember his father naming constellations for him as a boy. He wondered, lying there, whether that man even still looked up at those same stars anymore, whether he still remembered how. It was a small comfort and a sharp ache both at once. There were nights on that road where he almost turned back toward the far country instead. Not because he wanted to return to that life, but because facing his father felt harder, somehow, than starving quietly among strangers ever had. Shame has a way of convincing you that hiding is safer than being seen. But every morning, he got up anyway and kept walking. But here is the part of this story his son could not have possibly known. Walking that long road with his rehearsed apology worn smooth in his mouth. Every single evening, without exception, since the day his son had first walked away down that road, the father had gone out to that same spot near the gate. Not to wait, he would have told you, if you'd asked him directly. Just to check on the fields before supper. Just to get some air while the light was still good. But his eyes always drifted, just once, toward the road. Somewhere a father was still watching the road. Through every single evening his son was gone, through the seasons that turned, through the neighbors who surely whispered about the son who'd disgraced the family and vanished. Through however many nights the father himself must have wondered, quietly, whether he'd ever see that particular shape on the road again. He kept watching. He never once stopped. And so, on this particular evening, an evening that began, as far as the father knew, exactly like every other evening for longer than he could bear to count, while his son was still a great distance away, still just a small, ragged shape moving slowly, painfully, along the curve of that familiar road, the father saw him. Not recognized him exactly, not yet, not with his eyes alone. He saw the shape of him, the particular tired rhythm of his walk, some old familiar movement his heart seemed to know a full breath before his mind caught up and understood what it was looking at. And the father ran. This detail matters more than it might seem to, hearing it now. In that culture, in that time, a man of his age, his standing, his dignity, a man with silver in his beard and land in his name, simply did not run. Not through the streets, not for anyone, not for any reason. Running meant lifting the hem of his own robe with both hands. It meant baring his legs in front of the whole town. It meant making an absolute spectacle of himself in a culture where dignity was almost everything a man had. He did not care. Not for one single step of that entire run. He ran the whole way down that dusty road, an older man, breathless, robe gathered awkwardly in his fists, every neighbor who happened to be outside that evening surely stopping to stare. And when he finally reached his son, who was still trying, through exhaustion and disbelief, to get the words of his carefully rehearsed apology out, the father was already holding him. Arms wrapped around him before a single word of explanation had been finished. Face pressed against his son's shoulder, dust, sweat, the smell of a hard road and harder months, none of it mattered even slightly, before the son could even fully lift his head to see his father's face. For a long moment, neither of them said anything at all. There was only the sound of two people breathing hard, one from running, one from months of hunger and fear, and a road that never seemed to end, and the particular, wordless relief of two hearts finally, in the same place again. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you," the son managed to say, his voice breaking somewhere in the middle of it. "I am no longer worthy to be called your son." The father wasn't listening to the apology. Not really. He had already forgiven every single word of it before his son had even finished the walk home. He was only holding on. Holding on the way you hold on to something you were fully prepared to have lost forever, and didn't. "Quickly!" the father called out to the household, still not letting go of his son, his voice carrying clear across the yard. "Bring the finest robe we have and put it on him. Bring a ring for his hand and sandals for his feet." That last part mattered more than it might sound, hearing it now. Servants in that household went barefoot. Sons did not. With that one simple instruction, before a single word of forgiveness was even spoken aloud, the father had already answered the only question that actually mattered. You are not coming home as a hired servant. You never stopped being my son. "And kill the fattened calf," the father said, and there was something almost like joy breaking through the exhaustion in his voice now. "Let's have a feast tonight. Let's celebrate properly. Because this son of mine was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and now he is found." And the house that had gone so quiet the evening the younger son first walked away filled again that very night with music and lamplight and the rich smell of a feast being prepared faster than anyone thought possible. Neighbors who had whispered for months now gathered instead to celebrate, drawn in by the sound of it. Someone found a set of pipes to play. Someone else started dancing near the doorway, sandals kicking up small clouds of dust that caught gold in the lamplight. Someone pressed a warm cup into the younger son's hands before he'd even had the chance to wash the dust of the road from his feet. Someone else wrapped the new robe around his shoulders, still stiff with newness, while he stood there, stunned, still only half believing any of it was real. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't hungry. He wasn't alone. He wasn't, for once, anywhere near as far from home as he'd been convinced he was. Not because the younger son had earned any of it, not because his carefully rehearsed apology had been especially convincing. He had never even managed to finish saying it. Simply because he had come home. That was the entire condition. That was all it had ever taken. Love, real love, the kind this father carried, doesn't wait for you to prove yourself worthy before it opens the door. It runs to meet you while you're still a long way off. Now there is one more person in this story worth a quiet moment before we leave it. The older son, steady, faithful, the one who had never once left, who had worked that same land beside his father every single day his brother was gone, came in from the fields that evening to a sound he didn't immediately recognize. Music, laughter, the particular smell of a celebration already well underway. When a servant explained what had happened, that his brother had come home, and that their father had ordered the fattened calf killed in celebration, something old and tired in him bristled all at once. He stood there for a moment, still holding his tools, still covered in the dust of an honest day's work, staring at the light and sound spilling out of his own father's house as though he were the one who didn't belong there. "I never left," he must have thought. "I never once disgraced this family, never once spent a single day away from this work. And in all these years, no one has ever killed so much as a young goat to celebrate anything I've done." It's a fair thing to feel, if we're honest. Maybe you've felt some version of it yourself. The particular ache of having stayed faithful, stayed steady, stayed exactly where you were supposed to be, while somebody else's mess seems to get all the attention, all the mercy, all the celebration. The father went out to him too. Not with correction, not with disappointment, with the very same open hands he'd used running down that road. "Son," he said gently, "you have been with me this whole time. Do you understand that? Everything I have has always already been yours. But your brother was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found. How could we not celebrate a thing like that?" The story doesn't tell us what the older son decided to do next. Maybe that's exactly on purpose. Maybe it's left unfinished so that every single one of us, the ones who've wandered far and the ones who've stayed close the whole time, can quietly decide for ourselves whether we'll walk into a house this full of grace or stand outside it a little longer. If you're still here with me, still listening, I want to speak to you directly for a moment. Maybe tonight you're carrying something you've never said out loud to anyone. A choice you can't undo. A version of your life you thought you'd have by now, and don't. Some distance you put between yourself and the people, or the faith, or the person you used to be, that you're not sure how to close. Here is what this story wants you to know, more than anything else in it. The running wasn't a reward for a good apology. The robe and the ring weren't given because the son had proven himself first. They were given because he came home. That was the only condition. Not perfection, not a flawless explanation, just turning around and walking back toward love, however slowly, however unsure of his welcome. Wherever you've wandered, whatever chapter of your own life feels furthest from who you meant to be, the road back has never actually been closed. You've just been imagining, maybe, that it would end in a locked door instead of open arms. It won't. There's a difference, I think, between the son's guilt and the shame that kept him in that field so much longer than the distance alone ever should have. Guilt says, I did something wrong. It's painful, but it's honest, and it points somewhere, back toward the road, back toward home, back toward making things right. Shame says something crueler. Shame says, I am something wrong. Shame doesn't point you toward the road. It convinces you the road isn't yours to walk anymore. The son felt both on that walk home, but only one of them was actually true. He had done wrong. That part was real, and he never once denied it, not even in his rehearsed apology. But he was not, and had never been, unworthy of love itself. Those are two very different things, and shame will spend your whole life trying to convince you they're the same one. Maybe your far country wasn't a place at all. Maybe it was a habit you couldn't put down, or a year you can't quite look back on, or a relationship you damaged and never fully repaired, or a version of faith you walked away from and have been quietly grieving ever since. Whatever shape it took for you, the story doesn't change. Maybe it wasn't even something you did. Maybe it was something that was done to you so long ago that convinced you love came with conditions attached, and you've been quietly trying to earn your way back to worthiness ever since, without ever quite believing you'd arrived. Somewhere, even now, love is still watching the road for you. Not with a list of everything you owe, not with conditions written in fine print, waiting to be read back to you the moment you arrive. Just watching, just waiting to run. You don't have to have the apology perfectly rehearsed. You don't have to arrive clean or certain or fully healed or sure you'll never wander again. You only have to turn around. In a strange way, you're already doing it. Just by being here, just by letting this story reach the tired parts of you, instead of the parts you usually show the world, you're already turning around. Already taking a step back towards something warmer than where you've been standing. That's not nothing. That might, in fact, be everything. And if some part of you feels more like the son who stayed, tired, faithful, quietly wondering if anyone notices, hear this too. You were never overlooked. Everything good has always already included you as well. There's room at this table for both kinds of tired hearts tonight. However far you think you've gone, however long you think you've been gone, the distance was never as final as it felt in the dark. It rarely is. Maybe that's the real heart of this whole story. Not that one son was right and the other was wrong. Not that leaving is worse than staying, or staying is somehow less remarkable than coming back. Just that love, the real kind, the kind this father carried for both of his sons without measuring or comparing, was never something either of them had to earn in the first place. It never asked to be earned. It only ever asked to be received. So let this be the night you stop rehearsing your case and simply rest. You are not too far gone. You were never too far gone. Let your breathing slow now, however it wants to. There's nothing left to carry into sleep tonight, except the knowledge that you are wanted, exactly as you are, exactly where you've wandered to. Somewhere, even now, a father is still watching the road. And somewhere, even now, that same watching, that same waiting, That same love that doesn't require you to earn it first is watching for you too. You are home. Or you are on your way home. Either one is enough for tonight. There is nothing left to solve tonight. Nothing left to prove, to fix, to figure out before you're allowed to rest. The road can wait until morning, if there's any road left to walk at all. For tonight, just let yourself be held. Rest now. You are loved. You are welcomed. No matter how far, no matter how long you've been gone. Sleep well.